We, the North. In many ways, we're in a league of our own. One step removed. Just beyond the boundaries. Some would say we're on the outside looking in. But from our perspective, we're on the outside looking within. Because that's where the effort resides. Toughness is found. The aggression is tapped. On the inside. Far from the east side. Miles from the west side. Nowhere near the south side. We are the north side. A territory all our own. And if that makes us outsiders, we're in.
The Toronto Raptors are experiencing their best season in franchise history, reaching the Eastern Conference Finals for the first time in their 21 years of existence. However, they've appeared to hit a rough patch against the freight train, which is the Cleveland Cavaliers. How will the outcome of this series and the season affect the future of head coach Dwane Casey and the franchise? I had the opportunity to catch up with TSN story editor Eric Cohen to get his thoughts on the matter. We started our conversation by reviewing their effort against the Cavaliers thus far and what to make of this current run.
Well, the run's been great. The run's been great for the franchise and for the city. As you mentioned, they've never been to the East Final before, so it's new territory for this team, which is great. You look at what they did. I mean, they were the number 2 seeds. They were the second best team in the East. So really, to get here, they did what they were supposed to do. They beat inferior opponents in Indiana and Miami. I think the one thing that you could say negative about that is that they didn't do it very easily. Obviously, having to go 7 games against both teams, having to fall behind in each series, losing game 1, being forced to win game 2, and both series were the exact same, right? They went on the road, they won game 3, had a chance to take a stranglehold, but they lost game 4. They came home, they won game 5, they had a chance to end the series in 6, and they lost game 6 both in Indiana and in Miami, which forced them to play 2 game 7. So that made it that, here the Raptors are in the East Final, the East Final starting on Tuesday, and they had 1 day rest. So, that makes things very, very difficult for them. Obviously, it showed in game 1. The Cavaliers, after a nice surge by the Raptors in the first quarter, the Cavs really took control after that with a 22-2 run. They won going away. The Raptors didn't do a lot of very good things in that game. It was the first time in franchise history that Lowry and DeRozan, when playing together, weren't even able to get to the line once. So they weren't getting to the basket. They weren't drawing fouls. They weren't able to slow down Cleveland's offense at all. I mean, the Cavaliers shot 67% in the first half. LeBron James pretty much didn't miss. And last night didn't go very well. So while there's a lot of positives about the Raptors and what they've done so far, this is a different beast. I mean, they beat the 2 teams that they certainly should be beating. You have teams that are not as good as them, but this is different. I mean, LeBron James has played in the NBA Finals the last 5 years, 4 straight in Miami, last year in Cleveland. This guy doesn't lose in the playoffs. In fact, Cleveland hasn't lost a game yet after sweeping Detroit and sweeping Atlanta. So this is going to be a real tough test for the Raptors. It's nice that they're here, but Cleveland just might show them that they've got a long way to go.
And when we look at the Raptors, they're obviously missing a major piece in Jonas Valanciunas. I'm just wondering if you could give me an update on his injury status and whether or not you think he's going to play in this series and whether you think he'll make a difference.
The injury is basically he is out for, obviously, game 1. Does not look like he'll play game 2. The Raptors are optimistic that he will play when the series shifts back to Toronto on Saturday night for game number 3. Jonas Valanciunas was very, very good for the Raptors. He was their best player throughout most of the Indiana series. He was very good in the Miami series until he got hurt. So it's a loss, but I mean, it's one of those things that by losing him, you know, Bismack Biyombo plays, and Biyombo is probably a better rebounder and better defender. He doesn't score the way Valanciunas does, so they're gonna miss the offense that JV provides, but they don't lose a lot in other areas, which means that although Valanciunas was very, very good, I don't know how much of a difference he'll make in this Cleveland series. I mean, you know, DeMar Carroll was asked to guard LeBron James last year when he was in Atlanta. In the East Final, the Atlanta Hawks swept the Cavaliers. The Atlanta Hawks were swept by the Cavaliers in that series, and last night Carroll really struggled defensively again. So JV's one guy. JV's a good piece, but, you know, even having JV back isn't necessarily going to mean anything in this series for the Raptors.
And when we look at what makes the Raptors go, obviously Kyle Lowry had a good Game 7 against Miami, and if the Raptors are going to make a dent in this playoff series, he's going to have to be big for them. So I'm just wondering your thoughts on his first extended playoff run with the Raptors.
Well, I think it's safe to say that both Lowry and DeRozan have been inconsistent. They've had very good games. I thought Lowry really came on very well in the Miami series. His last 3 games were all very good. But, you know, that being said, he's the same guy who in game 1 of that series was at the Air Canada Center shooting at, you know, midnight because he couldn't find his shot in that game other than a half-court prayer, which was amazing. But you know, it's one of those things that, you know, the Raptors can't afford for Lowry and DeRozan to have off nights now. I mean, if they're going to compete with Cleveland, they need their best to be their best, and they need to play above what they're capable of. So that means that Lowry and DeRozan will need to dominate for the Raptors to be in this series.
And when we look at head coach Dwane Casey, obviously this has been the best season in franchise history with the 56 wins and making it to the Eastern Conference Finals. Now his contract's up at the end of the year, so I'm just wondering your thoughts on the job you think he's done and how he's brought stability behind the bench for the Raptors.
I think Dwane Casey's done a very good job for the Raptors. I'm very happy with what, you know, obviously the progress this team has made. Obviously, last year was very disappointing, getting swept by Washington the way they did. I mean, the Raptors have won their division 3 straight years, and they, you know, had lost in the first round the previous 2 years, losing in Game 7 to Brooklyn a couple years ago, getting swept by the Wizards last year. This year they took the right steps. It wasn't easy. As I mentioned earlier, I think a lot of Raptor fans probably would have liked them to have disposed of Indiana and Miami a little quicker, but that didn't happen. But they won. At the end of the day, they won, and at the end of the day, they're in the East Final. If Game 1 is any indication, the East Final might not go very long. It might not be very pretty for this franchise, but you got to look at the positives and say, hey, they're taking the right steps. They're not where Cleveland is, but, you know, no one else in the East is. So Toronto may be the closest to being the best in that conference, but, you know, close isn't good enough when it comes to the Cavs. So I think Dwane Casey will be re-upped. I think they will negotiate something that is fair. I think Casey has this team going in the right direction, but it's clear after watching Game 1 they're just not maybe an elite team just yet.
And when we look at the overall season for the Raptors, including this series and making it to the Eastern Conference Finals, how do you think this season should be judged for the franchise moving forward depending on what happens against Cleveland?
Well, no matter what happens against Cleveland, it's the most successful season the Raptors have ever had. They won more games than they ever had. They won the division again, and they reached the East Final for the first time in franchise history. So overall, I think when you look at the body of work, you have to be happy and feel positive about what the Raptors did. It's going to be an interesting off-season, though, because obviously DeMar DeRozan is up for a contract, and he'll want max money. I don't know if the Raptors are willing to give him that. He's had a lot of inconsistent games in the playoffs especially, and I just don't know if the Raptors feel like he is a max player. So that will determine where the Raptors go from here. They do have a number 9 overall pick in the lottery. That's nice, obviously, to be able to be an Eastern Conference finalist and have a lottery pick. That's something that does not happen every day. In fact, it's only the second time that's ever happened in 25 years. Back in 2003 when the Pistons were in the final, they had the second overall pick and made a huge blunder drafting Darko Milicic and not Carmelo Anthony, but that's, the last time a team was in the same situation as the Raptors, meaning that they had this kind of regular season and playoff success and still had a lottery pick. So that is a very big positive for this franchise.